both of these are representing of a hollow ground, which is the actual hollow ground section, and then the actual bevel, that's the cutting edge. And you can see, okay, let's say for example, this purple, below the purple line, these were diamond rods, okay? You can see that as you try to line your edge up, you know, and find that edge, there's two things that can happen, and this can happen at a very, like how you say, subtle level. You can not hit the edge, and therefore only affect this area, or you can hit the actual edge too much and not affect this back area, and this will of course make you lose your V edge. With practice, hopefully get it to where you can get always in the middle and scrape the entire actual cutting edge, cutting bevel. On a diamond rod, because the surface is so abrasive, if this was a diamond rod, whether you did this or you did this, you will remove you will remove this entire area by the time you're done pulling it across the rod, and you'll still end up with a V edge. And this is why a lot of people will say that they prefer diamond rod systems, or they feel that diamond rod systems are so effective. Blunt Truth, he used diamond rods and the guided diamond rod systems because, if I can show representative this paper, this was the diamond rod. As if you did this by accident and you pull it across, by the time you're done pulling across, it'll do that because it's just so abrasive. Okay, the diamond rod, you get a really nice sharp edge. And then you start taking it to ceramic stones, and you start repeating this process because it's the same thing. You're trying to find that angle. And you start doing this, and next thing you know, your edge is rounding off, and you get kind of more dull. And so you kind of maybe go back to diamond rods, or maybe you consider that only diamond rods are the best way to go. Ultimately, though, this isn't what's dulling your knife. Because if you look at this now, when you convex an edge, you purposely do this. You purposely try to remove the thin point of the cutting edge and kind of round this area off on both sides. So it isn't the process of you doing this that dulls your knife even when you have a V edge. If you think about what it is, then is actually this graph right here. You see, okay, your bevel, this entire section right here could be representative of this purple, blue, and magenta line. Now, the purple edge would be the actual cutting edge. And that's what you have to realize. Whether your knife is convex or V, the actual cutting edge is always, you're aiming for, is a nice thin little razor strip of metal. Now, as you get into the blue area, now that's what affects whether or not your knife dulls as you sharpen it constantly. Because now, if you look at this right here, you see? This would be the very, very fine purple edge that you need to achieve, that cutting edge. But the blue area is the bevel, and this purple area, the magenta area, could be representative of the transition between your bevel of your cutting edge, which would be, you know, the actual reflective part that's the cutting edge, to the actual flat of the blade, whatever grind it is. What happens with the problem with this is, as you sharpen it constantly, doing this, towards perhaps the middle of the blade, towards the belly perhaps, you have done this too many times, which tends to be common. And then towards the tip, you've done this too many times, which also tends to be common. And then on both this side and that side, you have failed to make it consistent. So if you were to look down the blade this way, there could be imbalances. Towards the middle, this could pudge out more on this side, the blue area, and towards the back, it could pudge out more in this area. And what happens is, then as you sharpen it, and you do this, and you scrape off, logically speaking, if it was a perfect on both sides, you would just reveal more of a perfect thin purple line. But now, if there was a pudge in that blue area on this side, for example, okay, and you sharpen it this side, now you've revealed perhaps towards that middle area I was talking about, on back here in the middle area, a blunt area, which is basically a fatter edge, a blunt, thicker edge, a cutting edge. Because that's also what a blunt knife is a thick edge, a blunt, non-razor thin edge. It's not your inability to keep this angle consistent, you know, and avoid doing this or doing this, because this is what you're going to do on purpose when you want to convex the edge. So, a couple ways then to tell if you are doing this, and also whether or not your edge is in line, because that's basically what's the key thing. The key thing is having the main bevel section, the actual reflective section that you see on a knife, be consistent, you know, in terms of thickness on both sides ending in the tip, is the first thing. And the second thing is making sure that your edge is in a line, a very straight, perfect line. Because if it's not, again, as you pull the knife across the stone, and you end up with maybe perhaps the edge shifting that way. And so what you have to do is you have to make sure, the second thing is that your edge is always straight, a straight, perfect straight line. Now there's a couple ways to test that. The first way is to take light and perhaps look at it. You can just eyeball and try to see if the reflection, if you see more reflection on this side, it means you need to sharpen this side down. If you see more reflection up here, you know, and you try to kind of mold it by section, just focus on sharpening whatever side that needs to be pushed back in line. The next thing would be is to touch it, and which I'm going to talk about when it comes to which type of blade is convex. You can feel sometimes the imbalance. Like if you feel as you run your finger along a bulge forming, you know, perhaps like I said, this area became more pudgy. You can feel it, you know, or you can feel it go shallow and bulge, then shallow, then bulge, which is this one right here. And so then the next thing would be you could try taking a marker and coloring the actual very edge with a normal acrylic marker or something, and then running it on a piece of paper, put the paper on a flat surface, and then pushing down on it as best as you can in a rocking motion to see the edge. And what this will do then, now for scientific purposes, you know, for consistency, don't do it just once, do it multiple times, which I've done here to my paramilitary. And you can see I had the most in the first time of ink. But as you can see here, there is a pattern arising. Towards the very back of the knife right here, there's a lot of little microchips and kind of inconsistencies. Then towards the middle section, right around here, which is right around here, it's thinner and razor-like. Then towards the belly, you know, if this paper can't really tell, towards the belly of the blade, the curve, there are little, how do I say, little nicks and protrusions, like little spots where you see the ink blotched, because there is some microchipping and it is a little bit inconsistent. And then again, towards the almost at the very tip, it's razor-like. And then at the very tip, which is always difficult, you have that pudge forming again. And this will kind of give you an idea of, you know, where areas are that need more, perhaps one of these two effects right here. So you know, you figure out if right here is because it's most likely because of a pudge. That is the main thing, is just to try to see if your edge is straight. You know, you can also cut, for example, like any common magazine, that paper is always kind of soft, and if you just pull and cut and you don't hold, you just let the knife itself cut and you just do this, it'll catch at certain points, letting you know where it's perhaps a little bit, has some microchipping and a little bit dull spots. Now the thing is, so if we're talking now convex edges, what's the best blade shape to convex? A full convex, then, if you can understand, to achieve that balance, and to avoid having any inconsistencies which would create blunt areas on along your blade, you would have to be able to, and there's just no way you could take a full flat ground, for example, and try to convex it and have it be consistently, you know, in that blue area, a consistent gradual increase in kind of, you know, curve going all the way equally along this entire blade up into this area and make it consistent. There's just no way a human being could do that. You'd have to have, you wouldn't be able to measure, be able to tell. You'd have to have it through machine work. I mean, you could get it pretty darn close, especially with lots of consistent, you know, keep doing it, but you still wouldn't be able to measure it. And as you work your way up the blade, you know, there's a lot of things that could happen. You could accidentally do this and make a certain area further up, make the relief edge wider and hit into that magenta area, which is what you can see, for example, on my little paramilitary. Towards right here only, the actual bevel is wider than it is right there at the curve. See, right here actually is where it's very, very narrow. It's inconsistent. You tell? And then on this side, a little bit better. If you see the reflection, you see it's a little bit narrow right there, but mostly consistent throughout. Maybe a little bit narrower, shallow, and a little bit narrower here, meaning that blue area is not as consistent throughout. It's the same, how you say, width going all the way. And that's kind of one thing. My concern is when you start to try to convex a knife. And this is what I was saying. I've seen in the other videos when people do it, that they end up with this whole belly, relieved far back, to where, basically right here on the curve you're hitting into the purple area, and down here you're in the blue area, you haven't hit the purple area, and it's all over the place. You never really have to do this. This is mostly for cosmetics, for aesthetics, making your knife look nice, having that bevel look the same width all the way throughout. If, for example, you just, you didn't like the curve, the reflection, that was bugging you, that's the only real reason you have to do that. This doesn't affect the cutting edge. This does. This, and getting the middle section of it, the actual consistency, the balance on each side and all the way throughout of the blue area is what affects the cutting edge. So now, you look at this, you have two options. Now right here is representative of two different bevel, I would say, widths. Now right here, this little small version would be my Terzula with its very, very, short cutting edge, short relief edge, very narrow relief edge, you can see. And then the graph right here would be representative of this paramilitary with its more visible cutting edge, because it's wider. See? Okay. Now, some people might say, like, again, I've heard in other videos that a hollow grind is not a good edge to convex, but I think in the end it's just your personal preference. If a convex edge provides more strength and you want that because I've experienced that when this knife has a V edge, it's much easier to get microchipping and rolling. It's going to become your personal preference what you want to attempt for which type of blade. But I can say that when you have this style, of course that's easier to do because the blue area is not as large. So you're not having to deal with as much blue area to balance compared to this Paramilitary 2, which has those inconsistencies that I can feel even because of that larger blue area, because of the thicker relief edge. So the thing is, though, now if I was to take this paramilitary and make it this way, meaning a very short, a thin bevel and a wide working angle, then it wouldn't be maybe as good of a slicer, and I wouldn't like that. It would be more of a working knife, So then you kind of have to pick and choose. If you were to do this to the hollow grind, it would probably be too soft. It would be too weak of an edge. So this is perfect for a hollow grind. So what I would call this is not necessarily a full convex, but just a convexed edge. And that's what I'm going to look at right now. Here is the common technique of how to convex an edge. Okay, what they do is they take a piece of sandpaper, and they do a spongy surface underneath, perhaps people say mouse pads. And you sharpen it just like normal. So you pull it across the abrasive surface. But you can see what this spongy surface does then is basically what the previous graph showed. It hits these two corners. It hits this corner and this corner, basically rounding it off, which is the exact same thing as what's happening here. You're hitting this corner and this corner, but you're doing it simultaneously. Now the thing is that then an easier way to convex an edge? It'll depend. For me, I feel then that adds another layer of skill, which just makes everything more inconsistent. The more things you have to be able to do perfectly, the more difficult it becomes and the more room for error. And what this adds is now the equation of pressure. If before you were just trying to get an angle to a proper angle, not have it be tilted too far back and not have it be too angled high, now you're not just dealing with angles, you're dealing with angle and pressure. And that, I feel, can cause room for error in terms of getting that bevel, that blue area, to be correct. So now what I saw on the Rockstead knives, what they do is they preset the bevels. They create a micro bevel, which you can see right here. They first have the main V edge, and then they create a second very pudgy, wide working angle micro bevel right at the very end. And then after that, they start to, through human error, you're going to do this. You're going to do this effect, and eventually you can round off. And here's the orange representing what the previous micro bevels were. The two bevels before are the orange lines, to become one curved purple. You can see this purple bevel, and then therefore a semi-convex cutting edge, cutting bevel. Now, so there's ways you can tell if your edge is convex. And now, if you notice, if you take any new knife, and you look at it in the light, the cutting edge, it'll reflect light as a flat surface. The whole edge will light up. A convex edge, because it's curved and rounded, light will roll over it. When light hits the cutting edge, it rolls over it. Can you see? Because there is that curvature. Can you see right here? This is a good example here. You see it? And so what you can do is to know whether or not you've convexed. For example, on my Trizula, I saw towards the tip over here, because again I said this is common at the tip right here, that their light wasn't rolling off of this area. Light was just hitting it flat. So I purposely took this side, and when I sharpened it, I raised the angle up, just on that little area, working that area until it started to balance, all the while making sure that everything's in line still. And the next way to tell, of course, is with touch again. You can run your finger along and feel whether or not you have any inconsistencies in the bevel. Basically what we're looking at here is you're going to need to be able to do V-angle sharpening and be proficient at it. That's the key thing. This method right here removes adding pressure into the equation by using a mouse pad. And to do this, an individual only has to work with two angles, the micro bevel right here and then the main bevel. And what they're trying to do then is just slowly round off this section, sand off this section, and and kind of just hit this angle and hit this angle, and just through human error this will all round out. And you can see right here, so to take a knife and convex it without a spongy surface would be more than the manipulation of the angle of your blade. At the same time, if you do apply a lot of pressure, some steels can roll. If you do this, it'll roll the edge over to the other side, and that'll convex it in its own right. CP M154, S30V, CTS20CP, N690CO, quite a few steels, just doing this will, and applying pressure on a ceramic stone, will start to curve that edge around. Let's say, for example, you have this, and if you can understand, when you're sharpening this way, and the way to tell this is, if you have your edge set and you find that edge by positioning the knife on the stone, and you take your knife and you find that edge, okay, and there's no shadow underneath, so you look for that and the shadow's gone, okay, and you do that. If you just apply pressure this way, once you've found that shadow, once you see that shadow's gone, you apply pressure, most likely you are doing this now, this effect. To get it perfectly in the middle, you have to be able to find that edge, but then it should be more resistant. You should be scraping this entire surface, which then the option is to color this edge, the entire bevel, that's the cutting edge, the entire relief edge, and then pull it across and see if you're actually removing all of this entire edge each time. And then that'll let you know whether or not you're getting it, not this or this, but in the middle. And once you can do that, know when you're hitting the middle and know when you're hitting just the tip, then you'll be able to control it, hopefully, and do this. And specifically, on purpose, round this off. This process becomes very, very complicated and very difficult. And I would say the best way to start off is to see if you can take your V-edge and sharpen it and make sure that you're getting the entire bevel each time you sharpen your knife. And that's the hardest part, I think, for a lot of people between left and right hand, is that maybe on one side, they can get the entire cutting edge, but then on the other side, you know, they only are hitting maybe the first half of it, the first 1 or 2 millimeters into it, and then the rest of it, this purple area, they're not really getting. What I suggest then is to keep focusing on the skill of angles and do that preset, which again you might have to use guide diamond rods or use your own diamond rods, and preset a main bevel and then a micro bevel, and then through your own skill of being able to sharpen consistently, hopefully more in this middle section, you know, a higher percentage than doing this only or this only, you will be able to round off this corner. And then you also should have enough skill at that point, you know, you count the number of strokes to round off this area. Whether or not you have created a consistent gradual curve, you will have to again use light to know that all of it is curved, and look for that rolling light that's visible when there is a curve in the blade, its blade's cutting edge. You know, you see that the tip, the light disappears. The curve doesn't last as long. See, you'll have to use light. You'll have to use touch to make sure that you're not creating any no part of that blue area is pudging out or bulging rather than being a shallow. You know, it has to be consistent throughout, because then, like I said, the main thing to remember is it's not, you know, when you're sharpening, being inconsistent of the angle and then removing, you know, the sharpened edge, which dulls your knife. What it is there being an imbalance of one of the sides of the bevels, and perhaps one side being more round or one side being more acute, and then when you do sharpen it and you remove that razor thin cutting edge, it reveals a mass on one of these sides. And so you're going to have to perhaps use the light, you know, look at the light to make sure it's a nice thin straight line always. Use a marker and test that to make sure the edge is straight. And then you're aiming to focus on balancing that blue area, the bevel itself. And keep in mind that the height of the bevel, the height of the relief edge, the actual width of this cutting edge right here, when compared to the Tuzula, even, you know, keep in mind that will determine the difficulty in maintaining that blue area and making it consistent on each side, so that when you do keep sharpening it, it doesn't suddenly reveal a bulge on one side and then create a blunt area. I still believe that hand sharpening is one of the best ways, especially since you can control which areas you're working on. The guide rods, a diamond guide rod system can accidentally remove the belly, so that's kind of tough. And then plus to always have that system, if you keep, you know, sharpening it and altering the edge geometry to where, you know, you have imbalances, this area is more shallow, this area is more obtuse, you know, over here perhaps is more curved than over here, you know, what you're going to do is eventually you might run the risk of just altering it so much that the blade is just, you know, you're going to have to get professionally fixed. So this video really was trying to talk about maybe techniques on how to keep it consistent, keep it balanced, and have the actual cutting bevel stay the same and stay centered and stay even on both sides. Thank you for watching.